Americans eat approximately 20 pounds of bread per person every single year. It's the most purchased item in every grocery store across the country. Yet, over 85% of the bread sitting on those shelves contains ingredients that would make a food scientist cringe: artificial preservatives, hidden sugars, bleached flours, and chemicals banned in dozens of other countries. That's why today I'm exposing 19 bread brands you should stop buying immediately, and revealing the handful that are actually worth your money. Some of these brands will genuinely shock you. A few of them are actively marketing themselves as healthy while stuffing their loaves with the very ingredients that are destroying your gut, spiking your blood sugar, and quietly wrecking your long-term health. And at the very end, I'll reveal the one bread brand so clean, so nutritious, and so transparent that even your cardiologist wouldn't be able to argue with it. Let's start with a bargain brand that is anything but a bargain for your body. Hashtag 19. Wonder Bread Classic White. Let's begin with the brand that practically invented the American sandwich. Wonder Bread has been a household name since 1921, and for decades it was marketed as a health food. Yes, really. The old slogan was that it builds strong bodies 12 ways. That was a different era, and we've learned a lot since then. Today, Wonder Bread Classic White is the textbook example of what nutritionists call an ultra-processed food. The ingredient list reads like a chemistry experiment. You've got datum, azotocarbonamide, monoglycerides, calcium sulfate, and soy lecithin, all crammed into a loaf that's supposed to be just bread. Let's talk about azotocarbonamide specifically, because this one deserves its own spotlight. Azotocarbonamide is a dough conditioner used to make bread fluffier and whiter. It is banned in Australia, the UK, and every single country in the European Union. The WHO has flagged it as a potential respiratory hazard, yet here it is, sitting inside a loaf that millions of American children eat for lunch every single day. Then there's the glycemic issue. Wonder Bread Classic White has virtually zero fiber, which means it causes an almost immediate blood sugar spike. You eat 2 slices, and within an hour, your insulin levels are on a roller coaster. Over time, that pattern contributes to insulin resistance, weight gain, and type 2 diabetes. Is it cheap? Yes. Is the price worth the long-term cost to your health? Absolutely not. Hashtag 18. Nature's Own Perfectly Crafted White. The name Nature's Own does a tremendous amount of heavy lifting here. The branding is designed to make you feel like you're picking up something wholesome, something that came from a farm, maybe a windmill in the background, golden wheat fields. You get the idea. The reality? This loaf is a masterclass in misleading marketing. Nature's Own Perfectly Crafted White uses enriched bleached flour as its very first ingredient. Bleached flour has been chemically treated to speed up the whitening process that would otherwise occur naturally over time. During bleaching, virtually all of the naturally occurring vitamins, minerals, and fiber are stripped away. The manufacturer then adds synthetic vitamins back in, a process called enrichment, which sounds positive, but it's essentially putting back a fraction of what was there originally. The bread also contains calcium propionate, which is a mold inhibitor. While it's considered generally safe, some research has linked it to irritability and sleep disturbances in children. Given how many kids eat this bread daily, that's a concern worth taking seriously. And despite the word perfectly crafted on the label, the product itself has received consistent complaints about its shelf texture, gummy when fresh and crumbly within days of opening. Hashtag 17. Sunbeam Bread. Sunbeam is another relic of mid-century American food culture. The smiling little girl on the packaging gives you the impression of innocence and simplicity. But take one look at the ingredients panel, and that smile starts to fade. Sunbeam's white bread contains high fructose corn syrup. in a bread loaf. Let that sink in. High fructose corn syrup, the same sweetener associated with fatty liver disease, obesity, and metabolic syndrome, has no business being in a loaf of bread. It's added purely to enhance flavor and extend shelf life at the expense of your metabolic health. The bread also uses soybean oil, a highly refined omega-6 fat that, when consumed in excess, and most Americans consume it in extreme excess, contributes to chronic systemic inflammation. Chronic inflammation is the root cause of arthritis, heart disease, and a long list of other conditions you really don't want. For a product with this ingredient profile, Sunbeam is priced as if it's doing you a favor. It isn't. #16. Great Value White Bread. We've already seen what Walmart's Great Value label does to bacon. Turns out, they bring the same energy to bread. Great Value White Bread is priced attractively, typically under $2 a loaf, and that price comes with a corresponding list of compromises. The bread contains both datum and azotocarbonamide, two dough conditioners that are either banned or heavily restricted in Europe. It also relies on enriched bleached flour, meaning the nutritional profile of this bread is about as close to zero as you can get while still technically being food. Customer reviews consistently mention an overly sweet taste, a texture that turns into paste when chewed, and mold that appears well before the printed expiration date, which raises serious questions about whether the preservatives are doing their job at all. At a price point this low, the company is sourcing the cheapest possible ingredients, processing them as aggressively as possible, and banking on the fact that most consumers won't flip the loaf over and read the label. #15. Pepperidge Farm Farmhouse Hearty White. Now we start climbing the price ladder, which means the disappointment hits harder. Pepperidge Farm has an excellent reputation. Their brand imagery, rustic farmhouses, old-fashioned craftsmanship commands a premium price and a sense of trust. Their farmhouse hearty white bread costs nearly twice what the budget brands do. And yet, it still contains azotocarbonamide. It still uses datum. It still has monoglycerides. Here's the thing about Pepperidge Farm: they are owned by Campbell Soup Company, a massive food conglomerate. When big corporations acquire beloved regional or artisanal brands, the first thing that changes is the ingredient list. Costs are cut, production is scaled up, and the farmhouse becomes a 400,000 square foot industrial facility. The taste is undeniably good. Pepperidge Farm knows how to engineer flavor. But you're paying a premium for ingredients that are no different from the budget brands you could buy for half the price. #14. Sara Lee Artesano. Artesano means artisan in Spanish. So when Sara Lee slaps that word on a bread loaf, they want you to picture a baker in a small town somewhere in Europe, slowly hand-forming each loaf with care and intention. What you're actually getting is a factory-produced bread with one of the longest ingredient lists in the entire bread aisle. Sara Lee Artesano contains datum, monoglycerides, calcium propionate, and soy lecithin, alongside the obligatory enriched bleached flour. There is also added sugar in a significant quantity, enough to classify this as a bread that tastes more like cake than anything artisanal. What's particularly frustrating is the price. At around $5 a loaf, Sara Lee Artesano costs more than many genuinely wholesome breads, yet its nutritional profile is barely distinguishable from Wonder Bread. You're paying for branding, for the font on the label, for the word artisano. You are not paying for better ingredients. #13. Arnold Country White. Arnold is another brand that leans heavily into the nostalgia and quality angle. Country White evokes simplicity, tradition, and real food. The product inside, however, is anything but simple. Arnold Country White contains high fructose corn syrup, calcium propionate, and a collection of dough conditioners that only exist to make industrial bread production faster and cheaper. Arnold is owned by Bimbo Bakeries USA, the American subsidiary of Grupo Bimbo. the world's largest baking company based in Mexico. When one company is responsible for producing bread on a global industrial scale, ingredient quality inevitably suffers in favor of shelf stability and production efficiency. Arnold has not been immune to this trend. Several customers have also reported receiving loaves where the bread arrived damp and compressed, a sign of improper sealing during the industrial packaging process. For a premium-priced white bread, this is simply unacceptable. Hashtag 12. Stroman Dutch Country. Another Bimbo Bakeries product and another example of the same playbook. Stroman Dutch Country leans into its regional roots in Pennsylvania, evoking images of Amish country and wholesome, simple living. This bread, however, contains datum, azotocarbonamide, and monoglycerides. It also contains soybean oil and calcium sulfate. The inclusion of azotocarbonamide here is especially frustrating because the brand's entire identity is built around the idea of old-world, trustworthy craftsmanship. It is worth noting that Subway restaurants faced massive backlash in 2014 when customers discovered their bread contained azotocarbonamide. A massive public outcry forced Subway to remove it from their recipe. Yet here it is, quietly sitting in a loaf of so-called Dutch country bread in 2026. The public rarely scrutinizes grocery store bread with the same intensity as fast food chains. Brands like Stroman benefit from that blind spot. Hashtag 11. Brownberry whole grains. Here's where things get particularly sneaky, because now we're moving into the healthy section of the bread aisle. The whole grain, multi-seed, fiber-forward loaves that health-conscious shoppers reach for. And Brownberry whole grains is one of the biggest offenders of misleading healthy branding. The first thing to know, whole grains on a label doesn't mean the bread is made primarily from whole grains. By law, a product only needs a small percentage of whole grain to use that term. Brownberry exploits this loophole enthusiastically. Their whole grains bread contains enriched flour as its primary ingredient, which means refined white flour comes before whole wheat flour in the recipe. It also contains calcium propionate, datum, and added sugars. This is a product cynically designed to look healthy on the outside while delivering the same refined carbohydrate hit as classic white bread. Also owned by Bimbo Bakeries. Sensing a pattern? Hashtag 10. Oro-wheat whole wheat. Oro-wheat carries significant brand equity, particularly on the West Coast, and their whole wheat bread has been a staple for health-minded shoppers for decades, so this one stings a little. Oro-wheat whole wheat still contains calcium propionate, datum, and monoglycerides. The whole wheat content is legitimate. Whole wheat flour does appear as the first ingredient. But the presence of these chemical additives undermines the brand's health positioning considerably. What's more troubling is the sugar content. Each 2-slice serving delivers more sugar than most people realize they're consuming in what they assume is a healthy sandwich. Over the course of a week, for someone eating bread daily, that sugar accumulates significantly. Oro-wheat is also a Bimbo Bakeries brand. At this point, if you want to avoid ultra-processed bread, avoiding Bimbo Bakeries products entirely is a reasonable starting strategy. Hashtag 9. Thomas's English Muffins. A brief but important detour from sliced bread, because Thomas's English Muffins deserve their own special mention. These are universally loved, and for good reason. The nooks and crannies are genuinely impressive, and the toasted flavor is hard to beat. But Thomas's English Muffins contain both calcium propionate and datum, along with soybean oil and enriched white flour. For a product that many people consider a healthy breakfast alternative to a bagel or croissant, that ingredient profile is surprisingly poor. There is also the portion distortion issue. Most people eat 2 muffins in a sitting, doubling the sodium, sugar, and additive intake compared to the per-serving figures on the label. Thomas's is also, you guessed it, a Bimbo Bakeries brand. Bimbo now owns more recognizable American bread brands than any other company on Earth. Their dominance of the market is the single biggest reason that ultra-processed bread has become the default American option. #8. Honey-made graham crackers bread. This is a controversial addition, but one backed by solid evidence. Marketed as a soft, family-friendly white bread with a hint of honey sweetness, this loaf sounds approachable and comforting. The honey in the name, however, is doing a great deal of PR work for a very small amount of actual honey. The sweetness primarily comes from high fructose corn syrup, which appears before honey in the ingredient list. The flour is enriched and bleached, and the bread contains the full complement of dough conditioners and preservatives that we've now come to expect from this category. The honey framing also makes this bread particularly appealing to parents buying for children, which makes the ingredient profile even more concerning. Parents trying to choose a slightly better option for their kids' sandwiches are being misled by clever labeling. 7. Martin's potato bread. Martin's has a devoted following, especially in the mid-Atlantic states. Their potato bread is soft, slightly sweet, and has a unique texture that genuinely sets it apart from competitors. Many chefs and food writers have praised it. So what's it doing on this list? 2 words: ingredient integrity. Martin's potato bread contains high fructose corn syrup, soybean oil, calcium propionate, and datum. The potato content, which gives the bread its signature texture, is present, but it's outweighed by a collection of additives that belong in a food science textbook, not in your kitchen. Additionally, the sodium content is notably high for a bread product, which is a problem for the millions of Americans managing hypertension who eat sandwiches daily without realizing how much sodium their bread is contributing. Martin's is independently owned, which makes the ingredient choices all the more avoidable. This isn't a massive conglomerate cutting corners. This is a company actively choosing these ingredients. #6. Dave's Killer Bread, white bread done right. Now for a controversial entry. Dave's Killer Bread has built an extraordinary brand identity around redemption, transparency, and quality. Their whole grain options are genuinely excellent, and we'll come back to that later. But their white bread done right product? It's a different story. Despite the name suggesting it's a health-conscious white bread, the product contains enriched white flour as its primary ingredient, plus datum and calcium propionate. For a brand that has built its identity on ingredient transparency and doing things the right way, including these additives in a product explicitly marketed as a healthier white bread alternative, is a significant betrayal of customer trust. Dave's Killer Bread was acquired by Flowers Foods in 2015. And predictably, since that acquisition, some of their product lines have quietly shifted toward more conventional and cheaper ingredient formulations. This is the same story we've seen time and again. An independent brand with integrity gets acquired by a large corporation, and within a few years, the ingredients quietly change while the branding stays exactly the same. #5. Pepperidge Farm Whole Grain White. Everything said about Pepperidge Farm Farmhouse earlier applies here, amplified by the additional deception of the whole grain label. This product uses whole grain white wheat flour, which sounds impressive and nutritionally significant. It is not. White whole wheat is a naturally occurring variety of wheat that is lighter in color and milder in flavor than traditional whole wheat, but it has essentially the same nutritional profile. The whole grain white marketing language allows companies to appeal to both audiences, those who want the taste of white bread and those who want the health credentials of whole grain. It's a clever hedge that delivers fully on neither promise. The bread also contains datum, monoglycerides, and calcium propionate. And at nearly $5 a loaf, you are paying Pepperidge Farm handsomely for the privilege of being confused. Hashtag 4. Flowers Foods Wonder Plus. Flowers Foods produces some of the most widely distributed bread in the United States. Wonder Bread, as mentioned, is one of their flagship products, but their Wonder Plus enriched line takes things to a new level of audacity. The bread is marketed with health-forward language about added nutrients and fiber, but the fiber comes from added inulin, a synthetic fiber additive, rather than from naturally fiber-rich whole grain flour. The enrichment vitamins are synthetic. The base flour is still enriched and bleached. This is a product that has been engineered from the ground up to look healthy on the nutrition label without actually being healthy in any meaningful sense. It is nutritional theater, and Flowers Foods deserves enormous criticism for it. Hashtag 3. Little Debbie Bread. You might not immediately associate Little Debbie with bread. They're primarily known for their snack cakes, but they have expanded into the bread aisle, and the results are exactly what you'd expect from a company whose core competency is making highly processed, extremely shelf-stable, heavily sweetened baked goods. Little Debbie bread contains high fructose corn syrup, soybean oil, datum, calcium propionate, and azotocarbonamide. The glycemic load of this bread is extraordinary for something that is not technically a dessert. The texture is almost indistinguishable from their snack cake products, soft, slightly sweet, and entirely lacking in any nutritional substance. The brand's entry into the bread market feels like a logical extension of their philosophy. Make food that tastes good, costs very little, lasts on a shelf indefinitely, and never mind what it does to your long-term health. Hashtag 2. Hostess Breads. Yes, Hostess, the company behind Twinkies and Ding Dongs, also makes bread. And if you've tasted a Twinkie, you already have a reasonable sense of what their bread tastes like and what it contains. Hostess breads contain high fructose corn syrup, datum, azotocarbonamide, monoglycerides, calcium propionate, and soybean oil. The fiber content is negligible. The sugar content is extraordinary. The sodium content rivals some of the saltiest products we reviewed in our bacon episode. For a company that has already filed for bankruptcy twice, once in 2004 and again in 2012, largely due to declining consumer interest in ultra-processed snack foods, you might expect some adaptation toward healthier product formulations. Instead, Hostess appears to be doubling down on the exact same approach in the bread aisle. The brand was purchased by private equity in 2013, relaunched in 2013, and has since been acquired again by J.M. Smucker. At each ownership transition, ingredient quality has remained consistently poor. Hashtag 1. Bimbo brand white bread. And here we arrive at the top of our list, the brand that sits at the pinnacle of ultra-processed bread in America. Bimbo White Bread, the flagship product of Grupo Bimbo, the company that owns nearly every other brand we've discussed today. Bimbo White Bread contains virtually every problematic ingredient we've mentioned in this video: azotocarbonamide, datum, high fructose corn syrup, calcium propionate, monoglycerides, soybean oil, and enriched bleached flour. This is, by every measurable standard, the most chemically complex, nutritionally empty loaf of bread you can buy at a grocery store. The fact that the same company producing this product also controls Thomas's, Arnold, Orowet, Brownberry, Stroman, Sara Lee, and Pepperidge Farm should be deeply alarming to every American consumer. One corporation has quietly consolidated control over the majority of the American bread supply and is applying the same low-quality ingredient philosophy across dozens of beloved brand names. The average American has no idea. They're buying Brownberry thinking it's a regional artisan brand. They're buying Oro Wheat thinking it's a health-focused company. They're buying Thomas's thinking it's still the independent brand their grandparents trusted. In almost every case, they're buying Bimbo. The bread's worth buying. Now that we've thoroughly covered the bad, let's talk about what good bread actually looks like and where you can find it. Hashtag 5. Ezekiel 4:9 Bread for Life. Food for Life's Ezekiel bread is in a category entirely its own. It is made from sprouted whole grains, wheat, barley, millet, lentils, soybeans, and spelt, and contains absolutely no flour. The sprouting process breaks down phytic acid, increases nutrient bioavailability, and makes the bread significantly easier to digest than conventional flour-based bread. It contains no preservatives, no added sugar, no artificial anything. The ingredient list is entirely recognizable. You could buy every item in it at a farmer's market. The trade-off is shelf life. This bread must be refrigerated or frozen. But that's not a flaw, that's a feature. The fact that this bread can't sit on a room temperature shelf for 3 weeks is direct evidence that it contains no chemicals designed to make that possible. At around $6 to $7 a loaf, it's priced as a premium product. But the nutritional gap between Ezekiel bread and anything else on this list is enormous. Hashtag 4. Alvarado Street Bakery Sprouted Wheat. Another sprouted grain option from a California-based worker-owned cooperative. Alvarado Street Bakery has been producing sprouted grain bread since 1981, long before it was fashionable. Their sprouted wheat bread contains no added preservatives, no artificial ingredients, and no bleached flour. The sprouted grain base provides a genuinely impressive nutritional profile, significant protein, substantial fiber, and a glycemic index considerably lower than conventional whole wheat bread. The cooperative ownership model also means there are no shareholders demanding that costs be cut at the expense of ingredient quality. The workers own the company, and the company's reputation is their livelihood. That alignment of incentives produces a fundamentally different product. Hashtag 3. Dave's Killer Bread 21 Whole Grains and Seeds. Yes, Dave's is back, but the good version. Their 21 whole grains and seeds loaf is genuinely exceptional, and it's important to acknowledge that, despite the criticism of their white bread line. This product uses whole wheat flour as its primary ingredient, followed by an extraordinary blend of seeds and grains: sunflower seeds, flax seeds, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, oats, rye, amaranth, quinoa, and more. Each slice delivers a meaningful amount of fiber, protein, and omega-3 fatty acids. It does contain calcium propionate, which is a genuine criticism. But in the context of its overall nutritional profile and the quality of its primary ingredients, this bread represents a significant step above virtually everything else in the conventional grocery store bread aisle. If you're transitioning away from ultra-processed breads and need something widely available at mainstream retailers, Dave's 21 Whole Grains is an excellent bridge. 2. Vermont Bread Company Whole Wheat. Vermont Bread Company produces one of the most underrated loaves in America. Made with simple, recognizable ingredients: whole wheat flour, water, honey, yeast, sea salt, this bread's ingredient list is shockingly short for a grocery store product. It contains no high fructose corn syrup, no bleached flour, no azotocarbonamide, and no artificial preservatives. The result is a bread that actually tastes like wheat, earthy, slightly nutty, with a satisfying chew that you simply cannot get from an ultra-processed loaf. Vermont Bread Company has also committed to non-GMO ingredients across their entire product range. While the GMO debate is nuanced, the commitment signals a broader philosophy of ingredient intentionality that is reflected throughout their sourcing and production practices. This bread is available at many natural food stores and some mainstream grocery chains. At around $5 to $6 a loaf, it's competitive with the premium mainstream brands, but it delivers ingredients that are incomparably better. Hashtag 1. Trader Joe's Sprouted 7-Grain Bread. And here we arrive at the bread your doctor would actually approve of. Trader Joe's Sprouted 7-Grain Bread is the most nutritionally compelling, ingredient-transparent, and affordably priced quality bread available in a national retail chain. Made from a blend of sprouted whole wheat, oats, barley, corn, millet, rye, and soybeans, with no bleached flour, no datum, no azotocarbonamide, no high fructose corn syrup, and no calcium propionate, this loaf is a rarity. The ingredient list contains nothing you couldn't explain to a 10-year-old. The sprouting process, as mentioned, dramatically improves digestibility and nutrient availability. Each slice provides meaningful fiber, plant-based protein, and complex carbohydrates that digest slowly and steadily, meaning no blood sugar spike, no insulin roller coaster, and no mid-morning energy crash. At around $4 a loaf, this is priced below many of the inferior mainstream brands we've discussed today. For a product of this quality, that price is extraordinary. The only downside, it requires refrigeration and has a shorter shelf life than conventional bread. But as we've established, that's not a downside, that's the entire point. What you should do starting today. The bread aisle is one of the most deceptive sections of any grocery store. The branding is sophisticated, the health claims are strategically worded, and the corporate consolidation is deliberately hidden from consumers. Most people have no idea that Brownberry, Arnold, Thomas's, Oro Wheat, and Pepperidge Farm are all the same company, or that Wonder Bread and Nature's Own come from another single corporation controlling a massive share of the American bread supply. The first thing to do is flip the loaf over and read the ingredient list. If you see azotocarbonamide, datum, high fructose corn syrup, enriched bleached flour, or calcium propionate, put it back. The second thing to do is look for sprouted grain options, short ingredient lists, and brands that are independently owned or cooperatively operated. And finally, don't be fooled by the words whole grain, multigrain, artisan, farmhouse, or natural on the packaging. As we've seen today, those words mean almost nothing without a clean ingredient list to back them up. Your bread should nourish you. Make sure it does. That's our complete list of 19 bread brands to avoid, and the 5 that are actually worth your hard-earned money. If this opened your eyes, share it with someone who eats bread every day, which is almost everyone you know. In our next video, we're going deep into the breakfast cereal aisle, where the deception is even more extreme and the health claims are even bolder. You do not want to miss it.